This video was brought to you by Brilliant. Keir Starmer has now been the leader of the opposition for more than 3 years, with him assuming office on the 4th of April 2020. After a rocky start, with Labour being more than 10 points behind the Conservatives, Starmer has slowly been able to recover polling, and for more than a year now, Labour have sustained a pretty significant poll lead. So in this video, we're going to dive into this polling in a bit more detail, looking specifically at both Starmer and Sunak's recent approval ratings, the 3 events that have shaped this recently, and why this is good news for Labour. So let's start with the numbers. As we've pointed out in previous videos on polling, Starmer took the top Labour job to some pretty bad poll numbers. Labour were behind in the polls by more than 10 points, and the government were in the initial stages of attempting to control the coronavirus pandemic, something that gave them a rally around the flag poll boost. However, for Starmer personally, things didn't look all too gloomy. His predecessor, Jeremy Corbyn, left office with pretty terrible poll numbers. 52% of respondents said that they thought that Jeremy Corbyn was doing very badly as leader in March 2020. An additional 23% said he was doing badly. In fact, only 11% total said he was doing either fairly well or very well. Conversely, upon taking office, 39% of respondents said Starmer was doing well as leader, versus only 17% that said he was doing badly. A lot has happened since then, though. The political landscape is entirely different, and the Conservatives are on their second leader since then. Starmer's honeymoon period didn't exactly last, and right now, his approval and disapproval ratings are pretty neck and neck, with 43% disapproving to 39% approving of his leadership. His opposite number, the Prime Minister, is faring a tad worse, with 51% disapproving of his leadership, compared to only 34% approving. Now, while Starmer probably wouldn't be too happy with the fact that his polling has declined, it's actually not the end of the world at all. Not only, as we've pointed out, is Sunak faring worse, but Labour is generally in a very strong position right now. The party's polling is very good, and it seems as though recent events have really played into Labour's hands. So we're going to split the rest of this video into 3 parts, looking at the local election results, immigration, and inflation. So starting with the 2023 local elections. As you may well know if you watch the channel, the Conservatives got absolutely trounced in the local elections this year, with them losing a whopping 1,000 councillors. What's interesting here is that the Tories actually started from a remarkably low baseline. This is basically because the seats up for election this year were last contested in 2019, right in the middle of Theresa May's Brexit failure period. In 2019, the Tories lost 1,300 councillors. The fact that this reduced by another 1,000 is a damning indictment of Sunak's Conservatives. Now, prior to the local elections, it seemed that political analysts framed the local elections as a litmus test for Labour and their ability to form a government in next year's general election. In order to form a majority government, Labour requires a swing larger than that of the 1997 general election, which itself was a record-breaking swing. So, it was argued, Labour requires a significant number of gains to demonstrate that they're able to achieve the required swing in order to win the next election. In fact, UK in a Changing Europe provided a benchmark, explaining that anything in excess of 1,000 Tory seats lost means that Tories in both the Red Wall and in more traditional Tory southern seats should be worried at the next election. This is what happened, and it looks entirely possible that Labour could still be on for victory in the next election. So, moving on to the second recent event that has played into Labour's hands: immigration. Immigration has been a hot issue for the last couple of years, with successive Tory governments introducing increasingly radical pieces of legislation. Boris Johnson introduced the Nationality and Borders Act, which allowed asylum seekers to be split into 2 different groups, which are treated differently by the state. One of which are groups who enter the UK lawfully, and the other is those who enter via an irregular route. Then Sunak went ahead and introduced the Illegal Migration Bill, which is still making its way through Parliament. This went even further and proposed detaining and removing those who enter into the UK via illegal means. It also removed the modern slavery protections provided to immigrants, prompting backlash from international groups such as the UN. Now, immigration is traditionally an issue that the Conservatives dominate on, presumably noticing that this issue was high on voters' priorities, with around 30% of respondents saying that it's one of the three most important issues for the last few years. The Tories have clearly been trying to appease these voters, many of which likely reside in the Red Wall. However, polling is showing that despite these attempts, the public just aren't that convinced that the Tories can be trusted on this issue. Right now, 80% of the public don't trust the Tories on this issue, and just 10% do. In fact, when we look specifically at 2019 Tory voters versus Labour voters and their current opinions on the small boats crisis, the number is remarkably consistent, with around 80% from both groups thinking that the government is doing a bad job. Ultimately, this is an issue the public cares about, and the government is trying to address it. The people, though, just don't think they are addressing it, or at least not addressing it well, which plays nicely into the hands of Keir Starmer. Staying on the topic of issues that play into Starmer's hands, let's move and discuss inflation. Alongside immigration and asylum, inflation is one of Sunak's 5 pledges, which he claims he wants the public to judge him on. Ultimately, the economy is the most important issue for voters right now, with us all still feeling the effects of the cost of living crisis. Inflation is still remarkably high, with CPI still being at 8.7% in April, and although it is falling, the Conservatives' credibility with the economy is being severely damaged. Right now, a mere 18% of voters say they trust the government on the issue, compared to 74% who say they don't. Understandably, this has played into Labour's hands, with them now being the most trusted party on the economy, albeit only by 1 point. However, given that this is traditionally the Tories' strongest policy area, this is quite the feat for Labour. So, in summary, the Tories just haven't had the best few months. They were trounced in the locals and had 2 of their traditional policy areas taken from them by Starmer's Labour. Labour's significant poll lead is still holding, and if this trajectory continues, then it's likely that Starmer could be moving his stuff into number 10 next year. But that's all dependent on if polling data proves to be correct. Now, interpreting polling is often pretty hard. When making videos like this, we rely on a ton of data analysis to interpret crucial economic data and understand political decisions. That kind of analysis isn't just crucial for our jobs. As our world becomes more driven by AI and data, your job will likely require more analytical skills too. Fortunately, you don't have to be left behind if you jump onto Brilliant. Brilliant is the STEM learning platform which can teach you all the skills you'll need in an increasingly digital workplace, from foundational and advanced maths to AI, data science, neural networks, and more. That means that the progression of tech and AI doesn't need to be intimidating. With easy-to-understand and interactive programs, you can level up your skills by spending just a few minutes a day on Brilliant. And you'll want to. Their programs have been directly built around the principles of active learning, so they're fun, interactive, and help you learn by doing. Plus, with new courses added all the time, there's no way you're getting left behind. To try everything Brilliant has to offer, free for a full 30 days, click on the link in the description. Plus, the first 200 of you will get 20% off Brilliant's annual premium subscription. As always, thanks to Brilliant, and thanks for your support.